to part 7 of the Mensteopathy informational introduction. Now, part 7 will cover the most important aspect of the Mensteopathy teachings. And you might think, well, why would you not just introduce it earlier? Because in order for the healing process to begin, you must arrive at this particular portion, which is where part 7 is the most important part, which is the true beginning of the Mensteopathy. This part is known as self-acceptance, which self-acceptance is the hardest thing all of us struggle as humans to learn to do, for our behaviors, for our patterns, for things that make us become aware of who and what we do. But when you understand yourself, you're only human. We are all human. And the more we can understand how we behave towards one another and how we internally experience our interactions as well, we then begin to see we can learn to heal the moment we simply say, I am a human and I am a sinner. But in the idea of starting in the darkness, I may work my way towards the light. And that begins at the first initial step, when you can actively say, this is who I am, based on everything that you were oriented or given your circumstance of life, that which you must now lift upon your shoulders and carry this burden upon your shoulders. Until the moment you die, you must carry this burden. And so if the burden itself is simply just who you are, why is it so hard to accept that? This is the first initial moment of healing. The portion where we then can re-put the pieces back together. The Achilles heel, if you wish, of both men and women is self-acceptance and our vulnerability of openness to one another is where we see a lack of connection between us, not just in romantic, exotic, friendship, or higher self forms of love, but in terms of our actual self-expression towards one another between simply the two opposites known as man and woman, and our ability to conversate or openly express, there is one particular factor in the mix that is preventing or causing a disrupt. And that is the fear we have known from the idea we will be judged for opening up about who we are. And when you open up about yourself, you may not necessarily be met with the same expectation you were seeking at the moment you were being vulnerable. And in being vulnerable now, you feel that it is not the statement itself that which you shared that is rejected, but that it is you that is rejected, that it is you that is judged based on something that was not necessarily in your control. In sharing each other's orientations in terms of our histories, not in terms of our proclivities. Because proclivity has nothing to do with whom you wish to continue with going forward, if you are able to make that separate and end the choice to continue as one together. But in understanding human behavior, we must now understand the complexity of its simplicity. Humans crave excitement. It's what makes life thrilling and worth living. And so, knowing that particular notion, we see temptation, but we have healthy temptations. And all behavior should be technically self-accepted if we're going to accept all behavior. Where's the moral compass in that? Because if we can accept certain behaviors for some but not for others, well then we can achieve what is known as a peaceful society. And a peaceful society begins when each particular individual of that society can accept themselves as a part of that society. And if the individuals voting for the power ruling above that society creates a sense of not feeling self-accepted, well, that's the beauty of democracy. The majority wins. And if you don't win, well then, you're the leftovers. And unfortunately for the left, we are now actively learning there is a new way of implementing government, which in a previous video I discussed as well in the Mensteopathy series of previous videos that which have created. I talk about how in the approach of government, you cannot solely rely upon 8 years of one form of government and then switch directly for another 8 years of government. Because the more you have the greater distance of time under one particular rule, all of a sudden you begin to become doctrinized to that particular way of thinking. And because of this lack of back and forth, it results now in people no longer knowing what should be what. We have people saying this should be this. We have people saying this should be that. Meanwhile, we all know we collectively want the same thing, but we agree on different values or opinions. And in the disagreement of opinions, we then see the separation where you can actively hold control over a country, nation, or world for a much longer period of time. And so, the moment we learn to self-accept, not based on the higher self of the government we seek, we can then all agree upon one particular truth. There is beauty in both aspects. And in knowing this, we must now understand that you can implement 4 years of, say, conservatorship, where you increase the wealth of your nation and lower the taxes upon its people so that you may save money at that point. And then when you vote or switch for the next 4 years of liberalism, leftism, you create then and implement with the saved money these social programs, infrastructures, and growth you are seeking to generate based on the wealth you saved in the previous 4 years of conservatorship. And you would have this rhythm back and forth, and now the more we create this, the more you can see we could literally end the debt of nations, and we could actively return the world to being out of being bankrupt. But why are we bankrupt? Who owns the banks? Because damn, you guys have that much power over the world? That just for typing a computer number into an account on a computer, all of a sudden we as nations are enslaving ourselves to fight wars you guys make bank off of, because everything circulates back to you as the bankers whom control everything in economy based on the amount of money you print according to the amount of physical value you are supposed to have behind that digital printed or typed number. But now we see in the rise of the banking system, they found a way that banks no longer needed to have a physical value behind the actual money, which meant they could simply type a number and you would then work for the rest of your life trying to pay that number back and then some if you were lucky. Welcome to the economic crash. This is the state of self-acceptance. And now, in the world of the economic crash, we will experience once Mensteopathy develops popularity, we will see people choosing to opt out of a scam ran by greedy few whom have created a way to make you pay for everything they own, which is basically all of us at this point. Now, you might say that sounds crazy. To a certain degree, why are countries in debt then? If our banks are not backed up by our own governed money, we should technically not be in debt within our own nations if we are our own banks, because the money would be recirculating back within the system, which would mean it would have a physical value behind its digital ID, its demerit. It would inherit its physical wealth based on an actual property value. And so now we see where we are lying in the process of our self-acceptance, because all of human experience up until this point has been his story, so that we may remain with our ball and chain invisible. Thank you.